February 28, 1997. The streets of Los Angeles were engulfed in a terrifying spectacle as an infamous bank heist and shootout unfolded. Bullets rained down as the robbers, impervious to police gunfire due to their body armor, struck fear into the hearts of law enforcement. The harrowing 44-minute showdown captured news coverage, broadcasting the unfolding chaos to a nation in disbelief. Inside the bank, terrified hostages cowered in fear as their lives hung in the balance, while residents of the surrounding area sought refuge, overcome by a profound sense of vulnerability. The sheer intensity of the situation left both police and civilians grappling with palpable fear as the perpetrator seemed unstoppable. This is the North Hollywood Shootout. Born in 1970, Larry Eugene Phillips Jr. experienced a turbulent upbringing. His father, Phillips Sr., frequently drew the attention of law enforcement due to his involvement in small criminal activities. On multiple occasions, Larry witnessed his father's arrest, which had a negative impact on him, shaping his personality for the worse. The cracks were already showing in his parents' marriage. Phillips' mother, Dorothy Clay, wanted to escape her husband's clutches and was determined to protect her son from his bad influence. On September 22, 1976, Phillips Sr. was serving his sentence in prison for undisclosed charges. During his sentence, Dorothy saw an opportunity to escape and soon moved Phillips Jr. to Colorado, far away from his father. After several months went by, Dorothy finally came to the conclusion of divorcing Phillips' father and cut him off from Phillips' life. After the divorce, the two moved back to California and everything seemed normal, or so they thought. Even after his parents got a divorce, Phillips' father was still a big part of his life. He took Philip to shooting ranges, live wrestling matches, and the Rocky Mountains. But what seemed like a fun way for father and son to bond led young Philip down the path of crime. During their time together, Philip's father often talked about how he hated law enforcement and how much he liked being a criminal in gangs. The more time he spent with his father, the more his personality started to deteriorate, and he wanted to become just like him. Philip saw that his father never had a higher education, yet made tons of cash on a weekly basis, and that drew him to a fascination with the criminal life. In 1983, with the thought of his father running through his mind, young Philip decided to drop out of high school and pursue the life of acquiring money by any means necessary. As time went on, Philip became interested in bodybuilding and started going to Gold's Gym, hoping to become the next Arnold Schwarzenegger. At home, he would watch get-rich-quick scheme infomercials, which helped him to figure out how scams worked and how to make money off of people. But before he could make it big, Philip was arrested on September 2, 1989, where he was then brought to trial for shoplifting a $400 suit from a Sears store in Alhambra. As Phillips was awaiting his trial, he made friends at the gym, and one of them was Stefan Emil Matassarino, with whom he shared similar interests. But he had no idea that his workout partner would turn out to be his lifelong accomplice. But just who was Emil Matassarino, and what made him join Philip in the life of crime? Emil Matassarino was a Romanian immigrant who came with his parents to the U.S. in 1974 due to the chaotic dictatorship there. Things looked bright for young Matassarino as his family successfully escaped Romania and were blessed with a chance of starting a new life in Los Angeles. But things were not going as planned for Emil, who was mocked and bullied at school for his foreign accent and being overweight, making him feel isolated throughout his education. Since he had no real friends, Matassarino found solace in the company of computers, with which he spent the majority of his time. As time went on, Matassarino witnessed his parents' marriage break down, as the home that was supposed to be a safe haven turned into a battleground full of verbal abuse and daily violent arguments. Things occasionally got so out of control that the police had to step in and de-escalate the conflict. As time went on, Matassarino eventually became numb to his parents' arguments and treated them as background noise, focusing solely on developing his professional career. In 1983, Emil enrolled at the DeVry Institute of Technology, where he pursued a 3-year program in electronic engineering. He completed his studies in 1987 and graduated as an accomplished electrical engineer. He tried his hand at running a computer repair business, but he was ultimately unsuccessful. During that same time, Matasserino developed a keen interest in firearms. He was occasionally seen by neighbors cleaning several guns. Matasserino tried to block out the noise of his family fighting for years, but eventually, it got to him and negatively affected his behavior. As a result, he was involved in incidents that clearly demonstrated he had anger issues. Like the time he swung a chainsaw close to his neighbor's face because the neighbor's dog walked onto his lawn. Matasserino attempted to have some control over his life, so he went to the Gold's Gym to lose the fat that he was once mocked for, and developed a desire to become a powerful bodybuilder. It was during this time that he met Eugene Philip Jr. The more time Philip and Matasserino spent at the gym together, the stronger their bond became, but this friendship would soon encourage a life of crime and violence, causing chaos for those around them. In 1992, Philip traveled to Colorado with a plan to commit real estate fraud. Posing as Mark Wright, he contacted real estate firms and visited properties seeking access to keys. He discovered 2 potential targets and observed agents unlocking the lockboxes, learned the combinations. Philip unlocked one box, bought the home and promptly sold it, falsely advertising it for rent. An interested buyer, unaware of the scam, confronted the agent and reported the situation to the police, leading to an encounter with Philip. When Philip arrived the next day to cash out on his victorious scam, he was met with law enforcement instead and was incarcerated for his crimes. Philip was released on bail by his wife Sharon, but his trial had not yet taken place. With the pressure of possibly a guilty verdict looming overhead, he decided to flee his home and seek refuge from local authorities. While hiding, he contacted Matasserino for assistance in evading the feds. Upon learning about Philip's situation, Matasserino decided to provide him with shelter until the heat surrounding him subsided. The two started traveling to various locations around the country. Matasserino gradually caught on to Philip's criminal tendencies as they both developed plans for armed robberies and vehicle theft that were soon carried out. On July 20th, 1993 in Colorado, the duo successfully robbed an armored truck belonging to First Bank Holding. After the success of their first armored car heist, the duo's adrenaline began pumping, inspiring them to plot additional robberies. However, their journey would soon come to an abrupt halt. In October of 1993, the two were driving at high speeds in a Ford Thunderbird rented from a nearby airport when they were pulled over for speeding and told to exit the vehicle. The officers conducting the search were shocked by what they discovered inside. Officers found 2 semi-automatic rifles, 2 handguns, more than 1,600 rounds of rifle ammunition, 1,200 rounds of parabellum and handgun ammunition, radio scanners, smoke bombs, improvised explosive devices, body armor vests, and 3 different California license plates, as well as 2 concealed handguns that Philip and Matasserino were carrying. The duo were charged with conspiracy to commit robbery and unlawful weapons activity and grand theft auto after the contents were discovered, and they faced up to 100 days in prison. The pair was freed after serving out their sentences, but it seemed like this was a warm-up for the duo as they continued to make plans for future robberies and heists, which were even more extreme and chaotic in nature. On June 14, 1995, the duo would commit another vehicle-armed robbery in Winnetka, Los Angeles, just as they had previously, this time targeting an armored vehicle belonging to the Brink Security Company. To obtain the money, the duo used automatic rifles to shoot down the car's rear door, but their actions had consequences, as the robbery resulted in the death of 1 security guard, Dwight Cook, and the lethal injury of the vehicle's driver, Felipe Cortez. But the pair didn't seem fazed by what had happened. They felt the job was well executed. The more they robbed, the more their arsenal increased, as the duo began modifying their weapons and body armor to withstand heavy combat. With experience, the two learned the patterns of how Banks' armored vehicles operated, carefully observing their routes and noting down the perfect time frame to strike. But deep down they wanted more, something that had higher risk and higher rewards. And so their journey of robbing banks began. May 2nd, 1996. The duo robbed the Bank of America branch in Van Nuys, Los Angeles, armed to the brim with body armor and assault rifles. The duo was able to execute the robbery in just 8 minutes and got away with $750,048, leaving no one harmed during the process. But the amount they robbed didn't satisfy their appetite, so the partners planned out another heist on a different Bank of America branch in the San Fernando Valley, this time expecting a payout of $2 million. On May 31st of the same year, they executed their plan of the robbery at around 10 a.m., during which they went through the same procedure as the previous heist. But this time there was a flaw in the plan, as their expectation of finding $2 million was shattered, as the bank had implemented enhanced security measures in which a considerable portion of the money they had hoped to seize had already been collected 2 days prior. Upon learning this, the duo got away with $794,200, injuring 2 bank tellers in the process. Philip and Matasserino quickly became menace to the city of Los Angeles, having every bank owner and law enforcement agency on their toes, praying to not become the tandem's next victims. Due to the heavy arsenal they carried with them during the heist, the two were labeled as the high-incident bandits by the investigators. But it seemed like their time of wrath on Los Angeles would eventually come to an end, as the two were just starting to expand into new territories of bank robberies. Little did they know that their next big heist would become their last. After the success of the Bank of America heist, both Philip and Matasserino were confident in their robbery methods and wanted to go bigger than before. So they decided to rob yet another Bank of America branch, this time on Laurel Canyon Boulevard. However, before they could go in guns blazing, they took every precaution during their planning. The duo carefully observed the layout of the building and made sure to map out the area surrounding it, pinpointing possible escape routes to help them get away from local authorities. In addition, the duo conducted surveillance on key individuals in the bank, which would allow them access to the money vaults. After weeks of scouting and surveillance, it was time to prep for the big event. Both Philip and Matasserino decided to modify their weapons and armor even more. Each man had their own unique style of arsenal. Philip carried 40 pounds of gear, which consisted of various items, such as a Type 3A bulletproof vest, a protective guard for the groin, a low-bearing vest equipped with multiple ammo pouches, and self-made body armor fashioned from spare vests. Philip's homemade armor pieces were specifically designed to shield his shins, thighs, and forearms. On the other hand, Matasserino opted for a simpler setup in order to have more mobility, wearing solely a Type 3A bulletproof vest. Although he took the precaution of adding a metal ballistic plate to safeguard his vital organs, the duo even had a watch sewn into one of their gloves in order to keep track of the time during the robbery. In order to make sure that no one stood in their way, the duo equipped themselves with extra armor-piercing ammunition that had the capacity to penetrate concrete walls. The duo used all of their life experiences and firearm knowledge to construct a plan, which to them seemed flawless. By the end of the day, it looked like both Philip and Matasserino were going to war instead of a robbery, ready for heavy combat and a huge cash reward. But with higher rewards came even more lethal consequences. On February 28, 1997, the two got ready for their big score on the Bank of America branch on Laurel Canyon Boulevard, but before going in, they took phenobarbital, a muscle-relaxing drug that would help them stay calm and focused during the heist. Both Philip and Matasserino arrived on scene in a blue Chevy that was spray-painted white. They parked the car towards the route that seemed best for their escape. As the two exit the vehicle, they set an alarm for 8 minutes on their watches. But as they were approaching the bank, the robbers were spotted by 2 patrol officers that were sitting in a cruiser nearby. As they saw the 2 armed men heading towards the bank, one officer, Martin Perello, called in dispatch and notified them of a 211 alert. Both officers positioned themselves behind a semi-truck that was parked near the bank while observing the robbers' movements. Meanwhile, as Philip and Matasserino entered the bank, they opened fire on the ceiling to intimidate everyone in the building and soon began their heist. But everything was not going according to plan. Unlike other branches, this bank had made precautionary measures when it came to preventing robberies. The money was distributed in different locked boxes, which caused the process of collecting the money to slow down. Along with that, the money that the robbers discovered didn't even come close to what they were expecting, as the bank had different money delivery times, which they didn't anticipate while making the plan. Nonetheless, with the clock ticking fast, The pair assigned the bank's assistant manager to collect the money and put it in their bags. While doing so, the manager added 3 dye packs into the bags as well. Meanwhile, outside the building, a small team of police officers had surrounded the building from all sides and taken cover behind their vehicles, all aiming in the direction of the multiple exits surrounding the building. As their 8 minutes were up, Philip headed out towards the northern exit of the building, where he was met with 2 police officers 200 feet away from him. After seeing the officers, Philip began his rampage and opened fire with his rifle in the public area. Chaos erupted and panic began to spread as bystanders ran away from the surrounding area, some injured in the crossfire. The officers began shooting but were overwhelmed by the firepower that Philip was using, leaving them unable to penetrate his multi-layered armor with their pistols and shotguns. Philip's armor-piercing bullets tore down the officers' defense, even penetrating and damaging their vehicles, making their escape from the carnage impossible. After the assault, Philip went back inside the building to reload and notified Matasserino about the situation. In a panic, Matasserino picked up the money bags and began heading towards the exit. But as the duo got closer to the exit, the 3 dye packs inside the bags went off, ruining the cash and their entire plan. Enraged with the harsh reality of how events had unfolded, the duo decided to escape and retreat towards their safe house. As they exited the building, the 2 began firing rapidly at the surrounding officers, mowing down anyone that came near them. Thousands of bullets soared and hundreds of locals ran frantically from the chaos, leaving a civilian injured and 4 more officers wounded in the process. After shooting down the officers and their vehicles, robbers saw an opportunity to run towards their getaway car. But during their attempt, some SWAT members fired back, shooting Matasserino 2 times in the right hip and left forearm. After seeing that Matasserino was injured, Philip told him to start the car's engine while he provided protection. They implemented a tactical strategy in which Philip took cover alongside the moving vehicle and shot whoever stood in their way using his semi-automatic rifle. Realizing the urgent need for more firepower, 6 to 8 officers made a quick decision. Taking action, the officers hurriedly made their way to a nearby gun store. Upon reaching the store, the officers urgently explained the situation to the owner. The owner selflessly handed over a cache of resources, which include a stockpile of protective body armor, AR-15 rifles, and bullet-piercing rounds. The officers returned to the battle site with their new arsenal. They now had the ability to fight back and support their colleagues. In the shootout, the car strategy was working in robbers' favor, but things took a turn for the worse as one of the bullets from the officer's gun hit Philip's rifle magazine, rendering it useless. Consequently, Philip switched to another, but it jammed during the gunfight. Due to this, Philip got shot in the shoulder. He was then left behind by Matasserino, as he was unable to keep up with the car's pace. As a final form of retaliation, Philip took out his handgun and continued firing at the officers, but was later shot in the right hand and dropped his gun on the ground. As he went back to grab his pistol, Philip realized there was no use fighting back and ended his own life by shooting himself under the chin. Upon seeing Philip's demise, Matasserino decided to hold tight to his rifle and drive towards the open road. The robber's Chevrolet was severely damaged during the shootout. Upon inspecting the car's condition, Matasserino decided to hijack the civilian's vehicle. He was successfully able to hijack a pickup truck owned by Bill Maher, but Maher activated a kill switch in the vehicle before exiting, which prevented Matasserino from starting its engine. After realizing there was no escape, Matasserino took cover by the vehicle's side and began to open fire on the officers. The standoff between Matasserino and the local authorities lasted for almost 2 minutes until a SWAT team member saw an opening to fire Matasserino's legs from underneath the vehicle. Matasserino was shot twice in the legs, causing him to collapse onto his back and leaving him exposed. The SWAT team then fired 29 more rounds on Matasserino, to which he finally surrendered. After this, the SWAT team hurried over and were successful in apprehending the bank robber, but were too late to bring him back alive, as Matasserino died from blood loss 56 minutes later. After causing so much chaos and ruining so many lives, the high-incident bandits were finally put down by local authorities, and Los Angeles was free from their endless rampage.
The most notorious of all daring robberies unfolds here in North Hollywood, California.
This is the gunman after he came out of the bank. This is the first of two gunmen that shot it out with police. He's firing at police who are across the street in a parking lot.
Wearing heavy body armor, so he's not knocking down at all.
You got AK-47, two of them are dressed in all black, heavy body armor.
All officers stay down. Shots are being fired from AK-47.
After the events of the shootout, the local authorities realized that the firepower their officers carried was not enough to handle high-level threats, due to which police departments across the U.S. underwent significant enhancements in their armament. Officers were granted permission to wield even more powerful semi-automatic pistols and even semi-automatic AR-15 rifles. As a result, the Los Angeles Police Department received 600 surplus AR-15 rifles, which were officially set as standard-issued firearms. Furthermore, in response to the extensive damage sustained by multiple LAPD police cruisers, newly manufactured cruisers were outfitted with bullet-resistant Kevlar plating. As for the guns and armor that the officers loaned out, they gave the guns back, but were demanded by the store owners to pay the guns full price as the guns lost their first-hand value by being part of a shootout. But the officers refused to pay up and left the owners empty-handed. The gun store owners decided to advertise the guns as relics from the shootout, which attracted a lot of buyers, resulting in huge profits for them in the end. There weren't many people that defended the deplorable actions of Philip and Matasserino, but what many people criticized was the way Matasserino was handled by the police officers. Many alleged that the officers let him bleed out and refused to give him medical attention. In 2017, the LA Times conducted an investigation which concluded that Matasserino's death was caused by the inadequate response and reluctance of paramedics to enter a designated hot zone. A pair that had Los Angeles trembling in fear and continued a bank robbing spree that lasted 4 years, ruining countless lives in the process, finally got what they deserved. But by deep diving into the history of Philip and Matasserino, we wonder, would things have turned out differently for the two if they had stable childhoods? And what would have happened if Philip had never met Matasserino?